It's hard for me to talk, I guess, front of mind of feminism. I think because being Asian growing up in Australia, the thing I felt probably most conscious of in my formative years was being Asian and a woman, but being Asian. Like, it's intersectional, it's coupled with that layer of identity as well. For white women, able-bodied white women, there might be a closer proximity to the idea of feminism, but like I said, for me, it's wrapped up too in ideas of race and that type of othering. My specific ethnic background is Hmong, but I guess ostensibly I'm Asian. So I think being like this weird ethnic group nobody really knew about, I then was this extra minority because there weren't very many Hmong people around. I think that kind of just created an environment where I probably did feel a little bit like unsure of like what is my place in this world. I first identified as a feminist. I can't really locate any significant moment. I mean, perhaps in some ways it's like, you know, being a writer or an artist. Sometimes you're asked, you know, at what point was there some type of awakening? And I think some interests, passions, values, not necessarily innate, but they've been simmering along. So there isn't a specific point in time that I can look back to. I feel like I've just been brought up with the notion that to be a woman is to be a feminist. There hasn't been a point where I've had to make that decision to be or not to be a feminist. But in saying that, I mean, it is a really loaded word. And there's a part of me that, maybe I don't know if it's entirely resistance, but yeah, maybe it's the writer in me that really just sits on that question about identifying with feminism. Because we do live in a world where the female experience and feminism is quite demonised, to kind of embrace that label, it really is like a bit of a thinking process that goes through it. So I wrote a book, which is a non-fiction book, a memoir, and in that, so I'm 36 now, and in that book it was me 29 going on 30, and at the end of my 20s I had like a lot of casual sex, so that was part of the content of the book. But being an Asian female, and I think talking very candidly about sex, men approach me, nothing lewd, but they all felt a sense of ease to reach out to talk to me about their experiences with Asian women. And I don't think, probably not necessarily assuming, you know, we can all substitute for each other, but around that time there was that layer of my experience where I thought, oh, maybe it's because maybe there are the ideas, the kind of really basic ideas about the submissive Asian female that, you know, someone can come and just approach you. And I guess a similar experience is the being on the street and someone just coming up and practicing whatever Asian language. Like I was in Bunnings the other day and an older white gentleman just passed me by and said ni hao. So maybe it was this kind of weird version of mansplaining, like having these men approach me, this is in relation to the book, and just tell me about their experiences. I did read one review on Google, just a Google review, where it was a woman and she would have heard me on the radio. She was just really disappointed because she said I had sounded like such a nice girl, and the book wasn't her image of a nice girl, because it talked about things she wasn't really expecting to come out of a memoir by a young Asian Australian woman. It's kind of on that spectrum of like what we expect from our minorities, that they behave in accommodating ways. And I think particularly with Asian women, there's a whole set and a whole history of ideas about how we should behave, you know, from within our own culture as well, but also, you know, broadly from like white culture as well. One thing that I've been trying to do, one smallest gesture towards a sense of like a level playing field, is just not to apologise so much to say sorry for taking up space, or not meeting someone's expectations, or not conforming. Not to like be a real asshole and to be obnoxious and not be empathetic, but I very consciously hold back on saying that word sorry as a way of just starting a sentence. That's just one small thing. Like I feel like I can do that. That's something achievable that I can kind of practice. So I think there's aspirations I have about my own practice of feminism. In my 20s, I thought, I'm just going to stop reading fashion magazines and buying perfume, because I know I'm just being sold this stuff. And if I look at the fashion magazines, it kind of just does breed a sense of like comparison between other women and focusing on how we look. But at the same time, you know, you can put the magazine down and like not fork out money for perfume, but then you step into the broader world. I think acknowledging that there are like a lot of forces at play that make your conscious decision making a bit more complicated. I think just being a bit like kind and chillaxed about going, all right, no one is asking anyone to be perfect, but at least just acknowledging that we do live in a world that's a bit more complicated than just being able to say yes or no to things, is how I've just approached not kind of getting into like some existential headache every moment of the day, because it does feel like we live in a world where there is just a real recipe to kind of think yourself into demise and helplessness. But yeah, just trying to give yourself props for making it through the day. So speaking to younger women who are growing up in a society where the F word kind of is a bit poisoned. I'd say kind of sit with the questions about why that is. Be open to having conversations around it, because through those conversations, they'll have a chance to articulate, what do they think feminism means for them? What does it mean to be a young woman in this world? And in some respects, I might hesitate to kind of want to pass down advice, because I think young women are growing up in a different environment from me as well. So there's other variables and factors in their life that I don't completely understand. So, I'd say, sit with those questions, argue them, think them through for yourself, read a lot, watch a lot, and seek out the experiences of other women in your own generation and older women as well. I just tend to think that kind of all the answers and the wisdom does, in a corny way, just does lie within yourself.